Now, I do want to make it clear right from the start here that this will not be a video where I try and create some type of mock battle where we see who would win in a fight between Rey and Luke. Rather, it's going to be a video comparing and contrasting these two characters and taking a look at why and how Luke Skywalker is one of the most iconic and beloved characters in all of Star Wars, and why Rey has become one of the most controversial when, in all reality, she too should be on her way to becoming a beloved and iconic character. And, to be honest and fair right from the start here, the character of Luke has obviously been with us a lot longer than Rey has, giving him much more time to endear himself to the fanbase. Not only that, but the Star Wars franchise was essentially built by him and the other beloved characters from the original trilogy. I mean, the reason why Star Wars is still going today, or has come back I guess you could say, and why Rey is even a character we discuss at all, is because of Luke and how he, and certainly the other characters, captured the hearts and imaginations of an entire generation. Which is kind of the problem Rey faces. Her goal in this trilogy, if you will, is to become the new Luke Skywalker, to become the new Force-wielding protagonist who captures the hearts and minds of not just this generation, but also the ones that came before it and already love what Star Wars is. Some of which, maybe most of which, are huge fans of Luke, and, right or wrong, have no desire to see him brought down even one peg in an effort to prop up or propel a new character forward. Is that fair to the character of Rey? Maybe not, but Luke is the precedent setter in this overall story, or the standard against which she is going to be measured and judged. Try to give fans a character that exceeds that precedence or is outright better or more powerful than Luke was, and people are likely going to reject her or at the very least demand answers as to why and how she is so powerful. However, if you put her well below that bar Luke set and make her less interesting or less powerful, people likely aren't going to care that much about her. Certainly not enough to carry this trilogy and to be the focus of it at least. But perhaps the biggest problem here is that when you really think about it, Luke didn't set that bar very high in the original trilogy. I dare say the biggest part of his appeal is the fact that he wasn't powerful, that he was the underdog and fought an uphill battle every step of the way, all the way up to the bitter end when he was victorious against two Sith Lords, not because he was anywhere near as powerful as them, but because he simply believed and put all his faith in his father. Had Luke actually fought in that final battle, other than of course defending himself against Vader, he would have either been destroyed or turned to the dark side. On the flip side though, Rey, in the first movie of this new trilogy, has already defeated her Darth Vader equivalent, if you will. And no, I'm certainly not saying Kylo Ren is on par with Vader in terms of power, I'm only saying they essentially fill the same roles within the context of their particular trilogies. They are the main foils for our protagonists. And even if you want to make the case that Kylo was injured or was more interested in gaining a new apprentice than outright destroying Rey, which are both true of course, he still lost to her, period. And it's very odd to, in the first act of a story, put your protagonist on a pedestal and bring down your antagonist, especially if you want tension or drama in the final act, which will of course be episode 9, when they meet yet again, which Kylo and Rey will no doubt do. And you might counter by bringing up what Luke did in the first Star Wars movie, or as it's commonly called now, A New Hope. He did, after all, blow up the Death Star. But there are a couple things to keep in mind about that. And the first and most important is that originally, Star Wars was going to be a standalone movie. Despite common belief, George Lucas did not have plans for a trilogy or had written a greater story when he was doing the original Star Wars movie. He just wrote and made one movie, and thanks to the massive success it achieved, he was allowed to make more. Keeping that in mind then, of course Luke was going to be the hero of the movie and save the day since it was the only Star Wars movie there was ever going to be, or so Lucas and those involved in the project believed at the time. Not to mention, maybe the most impressive part of blowing up the Death Star is that Luke was able to fly an X-Wing so well, considering he'd likely flown nothing besides his T-16 Skyhopper, which the movie goes out of its way to tell us he used to fly through Beggar's Canyon, or, in a sense, something like a trench. And he used to bullseye womp rats that were no bigger than the thermal exhaust port on the Death Star. In other words, when Luke blew up the Death Star, he'd essentially done something he'd done many times before, just on a much bigger scale with much bigger stakes. The next movie in the trilogy, The Empire Strikes Back of course, was then absolutely brutal to the character of Luke Skywalker. It took the hero from the first movie and tried in every conceivable way to rip him apart, mentally, physically, and emotionally. Not only does Luke struggle at damn near everything he tries to do, he continually makes the wrong choices, and in the end, learns a truth that shatters everything he once believed, as he discovers that seemingly everyone he's ever cared about has lied to him, from his aunt and uncle to Obi-Wan and Yoda. The only victory of any kind Luke gets in this movie is when he rejects his father's offer and chooses death over the dark side, or what he no doubt thinks will be death when he lets himself fall. Otherwise, Luke's only victory is simply surviving. It's only then in Return of the Jedi, after the crucible that the previous movie was for him, that we see true growth and change in the character of Luke, that he starts to come into his own and become a Jedi. We even see him using a couple of Force powers, like mind tricks and Force chokes. He also shows off some decent saber work against Jabba's thugs at the Sarlacc pit, and later against some scout troopers on Endor. And speaking of that saber work, he certainly seems able to hold his own against Vader now, though I dare say a contributing factor here is that Vader, as Luke predicts, is conflicted. Lastly, we do get a small glimpse of true power out of Luke in this movie, but it's only when he briefly taps into the dark side when Vader threatens his sister. So again, when you really think about it, Luke fails about as much as he succeeds in the original trilogy, and he doesn't do much with the Force, and the little he does do comes exclusively in the last movie, after he's both had training and faced his trials, if you will, which means a couple of things, not the least of which is, it's going to be difficult to have Rey not outshine him in some respects, not if you want to make her an interesting character, that is. It also means that when people see Luke again, 30 years later, they're not only going to want to see what he has become, but for him to be shown using the Force in ways we never got to see in the original trilogy because, well again, he wasn't all that powerful. Which kind of leads us to the whole problem of the sequel trilogy. How do you have Rey not seem like she's completely outshining young original trilogy Luke, which is just going to, and has, angered some fans, and then not have old, powerful Luke completely outshine Rey to the point where we don't care about her character because Luke is now around? Well, J.J. Abrams' answer to this in The Force Awakens was to basically make the movie about finding Luke and more or less leaving him out of it, till the bitter end of course, and creating a mystery around the character of Rey that, to his credit, kept fans discussing and excited for 2 years until the next part of the trilogy came out. And though I don't think The Force Awakens was a perfect movie, and it certainly has its flaws, adding another Death Star being one of them, it did a great job of bringing Star Wars back into the mainstream and getting people excited about it again. His choice to leave Luke out of the movie and to make it all about finding him is actually pretty brilliant, because it allowed time for the new characters to hog the spotlight a bit, while still making the movie essentially about Luke. And I think most people, though certainly not all, reacted well to the new characters that were given to us in The Force Awakens and were genuinely interested to learn more about Rey and Kylo Ren in particular. In other words, Luke wasn't the only attraction people were going to go to Episode 8 to see. I also thought Rey's introduction in the movie was damn near flawless, and immediately got us, or at least me, interested in this lonely, self-reliant girl living on a lawless nowhere planet. But as the movie went on, and she got herself out of every sticky situation, and used mind tricks and pulled a lightsaber out of the snow to herself over Kylo Ren, and then promptly defeated him in a duel by simply closing her eyes, I just found myself more and more interested in getting answers about the character herself, if you will, than just about the character. And therein lies what I think the biggest failing was with Rey in The Force Awakens. The mystery around her was more intriguing than anything else. We didn't fall in love with a character, we instead became enamored with a mystery. I mean, I don't know that people cared so much about what the next part of Rey's story would be, as much as they cared about where she came from, which is kinda odd when you consider Maz Kanata gives Rey the opposite message in the movie. Looking back, making Rey's parents a mystery was both the best and worst decision J.J. Abrams made with that movie, because it got people wrapped up in a mystery and excited for the next movie, but didn't get them invested in the actual character, while also setting them up for disappointment when the truth was revealed in the next movie. On the flip side with Luke, though, everything we needed to know about him was given to us right in the first movie, in a neat little easy-to-understand package. His father used to be a Jedi, who was killed by Darth Vader, who also used to be a Jedi until he betrayed the Order. And though that was only true from a certain point of view, or because George Lucas hadn't come up with the idea to make Vader Luke's father yet, what it did do was give us his backstory as well as begin to lay the groundwork for why he was about to take this journey. It's only in the next movie, after we think we know the character and the whole story and aren't expecting anything, that the bomb is dropped on us about who Luke's father really is. Whereas with Rey, we go into the second movie of her trilogy eagerly awaiting some type of surprise about her, and no matter how shocking it may have been, it would have probably never lived up to the hype because we were ready, and maybe hoping, for just about anything. So instead of even an attempt to shock us, we got the opposite. And I think this could have worked, making Rey essentially nobody, that is, if we still got an explanation for her incredible power and her ability to use it with no training. But within the movie, we're only told that she is a counterbalance to Kylo Ren. That's it. You have to read the novelization if you want an explanation as to how she can use the Force without training, though you likely won't like that answer, because she learned it from downloading it from Kylo Ren's mind during the interrogation scene in The Force Awakens. Furthermore, the idea Rian Johnson came up with to not have Luke outshine Rey in The Last Jedi was to tear down the legend of Luke in an effort to propel Rey forward. And though Luke does find his way again in the end, and it could be argued is allowed to show just how powerful he has become, to a lot of people it still came off as feeling like sacrificing the old to try and sell the new. Or letting the past die, or killing it if you have to, which I think people need to be reminded was actually spoken by the main antagonist, which means this probably shouldn't be taken as the main message of the movie. Anyway, I do get that you don't want to do the exact same thing you did before. You don't want to just turn Luke into Yoda and have him train Rey the same way Yoda once trained him. But the problem is there's now this implication, intended or not, that Luke had nothing to offer Rey, that she didn't need him, which is not only a sad ending for him, but neither makes her relatable to most people who have learned a great deal from mentors in their own lives, or endears her to people who wanted to see Luke teach Rey something besides reasons why the Jedi needed to end, and rather have him pass on what he had learned. Instead, we get another movie where Luke fails and fails miserably throughout before finally making a choice to sacrifice himself in the end again, only this time he truly does die. And yes, Rey also fails in many respects in this movie, and she makes poor choices, but her price is having to come to terms with the fact that her parents were nobody, and that maybe Kylo Ren, after she got it stuck in her head after a couple days of talking to him that he could be saved, simply couldn't be. She also didn't need anyone to save her in the end for these terrible, foolish choices she made, but rather still manages to save the day herself. Honestly though, in my personal opinion, I think they've tried too hard with the character of Rey. Way too hard. They've tried too hard to make her the next iconic character of Star Wars. Hell, they've even told us that's what she's going to be. And I'm not saying that an effort shouldn't have been made to make her great, interesting, and to endear her to the fan base, or that there aren't people right now that don't love this character. I'm just saying that creating an iconic character or setting out with that mindset, especially in a franchise already chock full of them, is not something you can just do. You can't just tell me that Rey is the next great character in Star Wars. You have to show me and you have to earn it. But instead of trying to do that, instead of trying to fit her into this story and make her feel like a part of it and a part of all that has come before, they've separated her from it and put her upon a pedestal, and now they wonder why so many don't like her or just call her a Mary Sue. And the thing is, even if Star Wars was a brand new thing, and these last two movies, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, had launched the franchise and there was nothing else to compare them to and nothing else that had come before it, people would still take issue with the character of Rey. And despite what some want to believe or tell you, it's not just that people who love Luke are upset that the new girl is coming in and doing things better than he did, that she's easily exceeding the precedents he once set. They're disappointed that it's hard to relate and cheer for her, that the most foolish decision she'd made, running off to try and save Kylo, didn't cost her dearly, but instead put her in the right place at the right time to save what was left of the Resistance. And I don't know about you, but the mistakes I've made in my life usually haven't panned out quite that well in the end. But you know what? I learned from those mistakes, just like Luke learned from his. And that's why I related to him. That's why I cheered for him. And why I can only shake my head at Rey and wonder what she'll be able to do next. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Now it's your turn to tell me what you think. So leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.